Hi, welcome to Home Farm. Today we're going to be unboxing and reviewing this water filtration jug from ZeroWater. So, water filtration is obviously quite a big deal, especially, well, not especially in the UK, but in the UK too, purely because you do have a lot of impurities that do make their way into the water supplies. It's got a lot to do. We're not water filtration experts by any stretch of the imagination. Water that does get purified typically just removes nastiness from it, but there's a lot of minerals and things that can remain in the water. That basically makes its way back into our taps, and we ultimately end up drinking that.
So yeah, for example, when you turn the tap on, sometimes you can smell chlorine, or when you drink it, sometimes it tastes more chlorine than other days. But typically, the drinking water in the UK is pretty good.
It is.
It's just that there is some things in there that it would be nicer if it was just pure. And we don't. You want to avoid buying bottled water.
That's a very good point.
Because obviously, none of us want to be buying
single-use bottles.
No, we don't want to be having that plastic in the oceans.
I think the biggest thing about water filters, we've been using a water filter for years now from Brita.
Yeah.
And basically that removes things like chlorine. It removes that smell of chlorine instantly. The water just tastes a lot purer when you're drinking it. The thing that is going to be very interesting about the ZeroWater filters, that we've said earlier that we use the Brita one. ZeroWater are claiming to do and remove a lot more impurities. You can probably see just by the size, well, when we get into it, we've got a spare filter for this one. The filter is literally like 3 times the size of the Brita one. They do actually send you a
remote control.
Not a remote. It's not a remote control. It's not a smart home gadget. It's a TDS meter. TDS stands for total dissolved solids, and basically those solids that make their way into the water are, in a lot of instances, natural. So, for example, when it rains, the rains go through the earth. They dissolve things like calcium and magnesium. And that ultimately gets its way into rivers. Those rivers, obviously, or dams, we're pulling the water from. All of that is present in the water, and that's what makes water hard or soft. So basically, the TDS meter is what we're going to be using to basically test the quality of the water from this jug. We'll also use it on the Brita, just to see we'll draw a comparison between the two, and then we'll just have a glass of water from the tap and just basically compare 3 sources of water. Cool. So that's quite an interesting initial test. We put the TDS meter into the ZeroWater water and it reads 0. The one from Brita keeps changing, so when I actually change it around it says 145. It keeps jumping all over the radar. Take it out, put it back into this one, it goes straight back to 0. So from that perspective, really interesting, but obviously now it's a matter of running this over a period of time just to see whether this kind of trend continues. And it's also worth noting that the Brita filtrates really, really quickly. The ZeroWater container took a lot longer to actually get the water into the main pouring area. But I suppose that makes sense because that filter is just so much longer and bigger and thicker than the one from Brita. This is supposed to remove all dissolved solids. So basically all of the stuff that we mentioned earlier, the magnesium, the calcium, all of the impurities, everything here is supposed to have been removed. Where the Brita, there are certain elements left in there, which means that the water is, in inverted commas, thicker, which maybe does translate into the actual taste. I don't know.
Yeah, the Brita is jumping from 132 to 144.
Yeah,
I've got to say though, don't you find it? It's like a magic show. Don't you find it just a bit bizarre that this is zero, absolutely zero?
But I suppose I think the test is going to have to be, well, they do claim that but when you fill your first glass of water with this, it should read zero, and it actually did. I was skeptical that it was. But
now I'm skeptical that it's reading zero.
Yeah, but now we're going to use this for, I mean, we've literally just done this, we've unpacked it and done this in like the space of 30 minutes. I think now we'll use it for a couple of weeks,
days, yeah.
I think a few weeks.
Yeah, okay.
And basically see how quickly this actually filters out. It's supposed to give us between 95 and 150 litres based on our original reading of 180 odd, which is a typical reading for the UK in terms of water just directly out of the tap. So based on that, this little reader is almost saying that the Brita has hardly done anything to remove dissolved solids. Obviously, it's removed things like the chlorine. I mean, that has definitely happened. And this is now claiming that it's removed everything.
And we'll see if this continues to read zero on it, because that's really bizarre.
Well, it's going to have to, if it does continue to read zero, it's impossible for it to continue reading zero, because this is eventually going to have to fill that filter, which probably speaks, if this is correct, to the effectiveness of this filter.
Yeah.
I mean, this is literally, we've just drank the first glass of water out of, a 3-litre tank. So
it's quite nice that the tester gadget actually sits. They've got a molded part into the lid, so you can actually just crack it into the lid and keep it there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if they hadn't have done that, you would definitely lose that. I mean, that's just going to end up somewhere. But that's quite good that you can keep it in there. Well, let's see.
Yeah. We've used the ZeroWater filter for 3 weeks, and what did you think?
I think we should start with the benefits of filtered jugs, right? The benefits of filtered jugs, obviously I don't want to go into it too much and waste too much of people's time, but obviously it's the not using bottled plastic water, that you're not buying bottles of plastic water and bringing it into the home and then chucking those one-use plastic bottles into landfill, potentially polluting seas and waterways. So that is the main benefit of it. There's a lot of downsides for me. Well, I'm sorry to say.
I don't know if there were downsides per se, but I just found
I'm talking about water jugs in general. There's a lot of downsides for me.
Okay.
So I don't like the fact that the filter has to be changed so frequently, and that is going into landfill.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of how many cartridges these things use.
You can supposedly recycle them. Where we live, they don't really take those kind of plastics.
Yeah.
So that's a tricky one. I suppose it comes down to where you live.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the cartridges. I'm not a fan of how much waste that creates. I'm not a fan of how heavy the water jugs are. I have wrist and arthritis issues in my wrist. Yeah. And I think if you're elderly, if you're senior, if you're got mobility issues, if you're younger like me and you've got wrist issues, then having to lift a huge jug of water, which, I mean, I know that they're plastic and light, but once they're filled with water and they've got the cartridge in them, they weigh an absolute ton. And that really does apply to Brita and to the ZeroWater.
That doesn't worry me as much, because you can also fill it as much as you want to. So if you only wanted to fill it halfway, you could have 1.5 litres, but the temptation is to obviously fill it.
Yeah.
I wanted to be full, so I've always got, in this case, it was over 3 litres of water.
Yeah.
The weight doesn't really affect me. I know it affects you.
It does.
But from my perspective, that is probably less of a consideration. So it is going to vary from person to person.
It is, but then think about for somebody stronger, for men, for other ladies that have stronger wrists and think that's fine. But what about for children?
Yeah.
You know, it's not easy for your 7-year-old to go and lift that amount of water and fill a glass of water. It wasn't easy for me. So there are going to be a big portion of the demographic that find it uncomfortable to use.
Okay. Well, the benefit of the ZeroWater is it did have that little release tap at the bottom, so that it kind of works around some of the issues that you've just described.
That was the cleverest thing they did.
The Brita doesn't have that.
Yeah, that was clever. It did have a water dispenser at the back, so you could just pull the jug forward and dispense it. So I do give them props for that because that was a clever thing to do. That was clever, and it's a good thing. I think a lot of other jug you know, in this space need to start to think about things like that. The flavour.
Yeah, so for me the biggest issue was that we've used the Brita for so long. We've used it for about 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And despite it probably not filtering as effectively as the ZeroWater did, I find that the water from the Brita is a little bit fresher. It's got a little bit of flavour and a bit of taste to it, and it tastes cleaner. Yeah. Despite the ZeroWater filtering everything out, there was a taste to it which wasn't as fresh or as clean as the Brita that I discovered, or I found.
To us, with our taste buds, with our water that's coming out of the tap. So I really do think that it's going to be different for everybody. So I think that that's quite specific, but that's just our experience.
And there's no doubt that it filtered out the chlorine. I mean, there was no weird tastes with regards to stuff that is normally found in the tap water. Yeah. But you know, there definitely it just didn't taste as fresh for me as the Brita.
Yeah, I didn't think it was. I didn't think it tasted as good, but then it started to go funny.
Yeah, so this was the biggest issue. So with the Brita, and we are drawing the comparison because I think it's quite an important one. Yeah, with the Brita,
that's what we've got, and I think a lot of people in the UK will have Britas.
They do.
Yeah.
It's got that little reader at the top, which basically saying the water's 100%, 75%, and it's time to change your filter. I think that particular issue we'll get to in a minute as to why I don't think that's necessarily working as well as they claim to be. But even when that filter runs out, you can keep topping it up with water. It constantly removes the smell and taste of chlorine.
In the Brita one, yeah.
But the water tastes fresh.
Yeah, it does.
With the ZeroWater, we were monitoring we were using the TDS meter on a weekly basis just to see, and it kept reading 0, 0, 0, 0. Yeah. Then literally overnight, it went from 0 to 280 something. Yeah. And we were in the kitchen, and there was a very odd smell.
Before that, I think a few days before that, we had visitors, and they had actually commented, "Oh, your water is starting to taste really lemony. Yeah. It's getting a really weird artificial lemon flavour to it." And we couldn't really taste it at first, but then
I didn't discover that at all.
But then after it was pointed out to me, I was like, "Oh my goodness, all I can taste is like artificial lemon." Yeah. And then 2 days later after that,
there was just a very funny smell in the kitchen, and we couldn't really put our finger where it was coming from, and it was only after we'd actually poured some water that the smell was coming from the actual water itself.
It was very unpleasant.
It was a fishy smell.
Very fishy.
We might as well. No, we're not going to lie. It smells of when you've actually cooked fish and you've left it out for maybe an hour. Yeah. It's that kind of weird fishy smell. That's the only way I can describe it. It wasn't a pleasant smell at all. Yeah. And the weirdest thing is that smell actually made its way into the water, and you could actually taste it when you actually drank it. Yeah. So obviously, that was a very clear indicator that the filter was done, and it literally went like that virtually overnight. Yeah,
it happened very quickly. I mean, I think it went through the normal to lemony flavour over a course of a few days, but then the lemony to the fishy, pondy, froggy kind of smell happened really very fast, quickly. And it was quite pungent. It was quite noticeable. And as Mars said, it wasn't just when you were pouring the water or drinking the water. It was actually coming into the kitchen. The smell, you walk past at first, because we keep the ZeroWater jug, we were keeping it right next to the sink. So I kept on walking past, thinking the sink. So I was cleaning the sink endlessly. I thought it was the sink too. I thought, there's something in the sink. There's something in the drain. Like something's coming back. It's a really horrible smells. I was cleaning the sink over and over again, and it wasn't until we actually removed the jug away, put it somewhere else, and said, oh, it's actually the jug. And then of course then you start to smell the jug, then you start to smell the water, then you start to pour it and taste it, and then you start to, oh, okay, this is where it's coming from.
And the annoying thing is that we use that filter to fill our kettle, so for the next couple of batches of tea and coffee that we had all had a slightly fishy aroma to them. So I mean, look, I mean, it is a drawback. It's not a particularly great point that it does that.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It is something that once you've actually removed the filter and put a new one in, obviously that ceases to be an issue. But the fact that it transitions into that, just I didn't find to be particularly pleasant.
How long did that filter last?
3 weeks.
Okay.
3 weeks, but it was 3 weeks. I would say that we are quite heavy consumers of water.
Yeah.
I would probably say that we're refilling that jug maybe 3 times a day, 4 times a day. So that's a good 12 to 15 litres a day.
But
over 3 weeks, that's not bad.
Is it sustainable, right? I mean, that our lifestyle is for us, just trying to be a bit more sustainable.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. So is it sustainable financially? Because how much do these cartridges cost?
They all vary, but I think you can pick up a 4-pack for £40, so basically £10 for that. I still think from a sustainability perspective, I understand your point. I do think it is better than going through 160 bottles of bottled water or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so,
and to be fair, we've never bought bottled water. We don't buy bottled water. We wouldn't buy bottled water.
No.
I would actually, because we're in the UK and our tap water is safe here to drink, I would actually rather just drink tap water than I would ever buy bottled water. And if we ever go out, we have refillable steel bottles that we refill. So we are not bottled water consumers.
But the water can be quite chlorinated at times, so I do think that I still would favour filtering our water as we do with the Brita, purely because if these companies could figure out a way of actually getting their cartridges to be recycled, I think that completes the cycle quite nicely with regards to sustainability and not having these things end up in landfills. The one thing about the Brita which I found quite amusing is that we predominantly used the ZeroWater for the last 3 weeks, and the Brita we just left in the fridge. So we only topped that up maybe 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And it was remarkable to see that the little meter on the top that said 100 dropped to 75 to 50 to 0 in the same period of time as the ZeroWater.
Yeah.
And we only filled it up 4 times. So it is a little bit misleading from that perspective. We used the little TDS meter. It's still registering pretty much the same levels that it was on the first day that we actually filmed this intro to this video.
Yeah.
So, you can't necessarily take the little meters as being completely accurate, because I do think that they are almost pushing you to replace them a little bit more frequently.
I was just about to say that they're in the business of selling you the jug, which they know is a one-time purchase, potentially, and then they know that their money and their revenue is coming from these filter cartridges. So for them, it's not within their interests at the moment for these filter cartridges to last for weeks or months. They kind of want them to last for a shorter period of time. So again, that's just, I don't know, there's an awful lot that I'm just not won over by. I'm not convinced that it's good for the planet. I'm not convinced it's that great for, us with regards to convenience and that kind of thing. But, each to their own. And, maybe there are other people that do find it, that their water, reacts differently, that it does last longer, that they're happier with it. They do feel like it's sustainable for them and their family. And, I think it's just a personal preference, isn't it?
I think so. So from my perspective, I do like the fact that ZeroWater have brought a filtration jug to the market that is capable of removing all impurities from water. I think that there's a big benefit to that.
Yeah.
I actually found it quite handy because we've gotten a little bit into home brewing, and it's quite important to have water that is as pure as possible. So it did serve a purpose from that perspective. But unfortunately, I just didn't like how quickly the filter actually ran out and the unpleasant smell that it had at the end of it.
So we were gifted the ZeroWater jug, and we want to thank them for letting us try it and give it a go. It's not for us. I don't think that we're going to continue to use it.
No, I don't think so.
And we've got friends and neighbours, and they're on a different water source, and they would like to give it a go and try it. So I think we're going to gift it to them, and with the last cartridge that we have left, we've got another cartridge. So we'll give it to them, see how they get on with it. You know, if they're on the different water, they're using it differently. You know, their household is different. You know, people have different taste buds and all that kind of things, different preferences. So maybe they'll love it. I don't know. But yeah, I think we'll just stick with our Brita for the time being, and you know, see how we kind of get on.
I agree. So I hope that you have found this review helpful and interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you on our next video.
Thanks for watching.